Under this backdrop, it is my great honor to introduce my distinguished co-panelist today, Angelina Jolie. She is one of the world's foremost humanitarian champions and unwavering advocates for the rights and empowerment of refugees, young people, and women. In fact, she is one of the very few people in the world who does not need any introduction. In any way, welcome to this. Since 2012, she has served with distinction as the Special Envoy for the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, firstly with Antonio Guterres, who is now currently Secretary General, my successor, and now Filippo Grandi. She has been focusing on mass displacement and their precipitating crisis. Angelina undertakes critical field missions around the globe, amplifying the voices and helping to expand the rights of world's nearly 80 million forcibly displaced people. Her work as Special Envoy has taken her to Iraq, Bangladesh, Colombia, Kenya, Jordan, Greece, Peru, and beyond. In fact, she has traveled to more places, more refugee camps than I did as a Secretary General. A committed humanist and environmentalist, Angelina is a celebrated Academy Award-winning actress and acclaimed director. Please know that I'm one of the great fans of you. I have seen Tomb Raider and so many other things. A true global force for good. I'm incredibly excited to learn from her insights and experience today on how we can elevate our concrete action to leave no one behind in a post-pandemic world. Angelina, thank you so much for joining us today on the occasion of this exciting GEEF 2021, a special conversation with you. Now, I invite you to say a few words to tens of thousands of many viewers all around the world. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much for your very, very kind words. You know, we were speaking before we went live, and I was expressing how much it means to me to have this opportunity to speak with you. You're someone who I've learned so much from, and who I listen to, and who I, especially in moments like this in our lives, we need to come together, we need to talk, and we need to speak to those who have come before us and done such strong work. So it's always an honor to speak with you. What I am so happy to be here, because above all, this forum is about our coming together. And there is no time where that is more apparent, the need for us to come together, to be proud to be internationalists, to be proud to be humanists, to be united, and to value each other with true equality and true generosity, and to stand up against human rights violations, to stand up against injustice. So we are all united in that front. I imagine your audience is very much united in that vision, or they wouldn't be attending. So it's my pleasure to be here, and I join all of you in hoping we find ways to move forward together.
Thank you for your very kind word, introductory word. Now, Angelina, then let us now begin our dialogue on matters of our common concern. Inequality, both between and within nations, was already one of the leading global crises prior to pandemic. Now, in our pandemic and post-pandemic world, we have seen an unprecedented magnification of such inequalities. Now, if I may ask you, pre-existing inequalities have exacerbated due to COVID-19 especially for women, youth, refugees, and they are all vulnerable group of people. How has it exacerbated, and what are the viable solutions to your mind that can be done in the year of 2021 specifically?
You're absolutely, you're right. We've come into this time, 2020, and this virus has exposed our vulnerabilities. It has exposed where we have given our attention and our value, and it has exposed where we have undervalued people and suffering and needs globally. So this is where we see how unprepared we were, how vulnerable we are, and why is at the heart of what we must address and the only way to move forward, right? We knew before the pandemic that displaced persons doubled in the last decade. We knew that long before the pandemic, right? It doubled. We knew that the climate crisis was displacing millions of people and families and causing more vulnerabilities, and we had to address it as seriously, immediately. We knew that there was growing inequality in many places, and we knew, for example, even domestically, we knew that domestic violence was not being addressed properly, and people within their own homes were in danger. We knew that education was lacking for far too many children. So now it's as if all of the fabric of what we've tried to do, or what we thought we were doing good enough, has gone up in the air. And we really see areas where we're not solving the problems, we were not doing enough. And so here is this moment where we look at the way what we value. And if we see, for example, in the pandemic, that a few countries have taken the majority of the vaccines and other countries and peoples will be vulnerable without this, and we're going to act selfishly, it is not just unkind or unfair, it is ignorant. It is not a way to balance and make a stable world, especially when we're talking about a global pandemic and a virus. So we're not thinking yet of each other collectively enough. And so I'm hoping that our realizing how interconnected we are, our being so aware of each other, will bring us to a new understanding of how much we have got to link arms and work together and be good to each other and value each other, and not just say we value these people in this other country or this other race, or say, make decisions that do not put ourselves in front of their health, their rights, and their possibilities by taking from them and limiting the support we should be giving.
Well, thank you very much for your very insightful views on that. As far as I understand, as a former Secretary General, it's a matter of compassion. Compassion. The inequality has been more worsened because of this crisis. It may be natural for human character that they want to take care for themselves first, before paying attention to others. That is what the global leaders have been doing. Unfortunately, there has been almost a war to get more vaccines for their own countries. Now, even in Korea, we don't have yet a vaccine yet. We expect that sometime later this month, we'll be able to vaccinate some people. But there needs to be some compassion. Now, if I move to another question, as you know, Sustainable Development Goals was the one which was adopted in 2015 with a target year 2030. We have just 10 years left to go. Now, it's a serious challenge for all of us. Now, the SDG continue to represent one of multilateralism's crowning achievements. I believe that this is the most far-reaching and most ambitious vision the United Nations has ever presented to the people of the world. But conflict, inequality, climate change, and now especially COVID-19 have all hindered progress on hitting these goals to ensure that no one is left behind. The SDG highlight mental health as a priority for global development, but we must elevate our efforts and allocate more resources, financial support to this essential yet often neglected or overlooked sphere. Everyone is entitled a life of dignity. Indeed, mental health programs empower local communities, reduce stigma, make sound economic sense, and crucially bridge treatment gaps. At the same time, mental health is a serious yet often neglected topic, especially for youth and refugees. How do you think COVID-19 worsened mental health, and what is being done now?
Well, I agree with you that mental health is an area we have to take more seriously, and dignity is intertwined with someone's mental health. I would also like to add that I think sometimes we think of mental health and we think about it as a resource for some care being given at a school or a therapy or a vocational training skills with support but the truth is, if I may be very blunt, when for example we have rape, and rape is something that happens globally, the effect on that victim's mental health is very serious and is affected. When we have a child, I know many children who have to flee their homeland, and they go into a refugee situation, and that situation goes on for 2 decades without accountability for the crimes against them and their families, without feeling that the world cares, living on very small rations, feeling like you're begging, feeling like you don't count, not feeling like a human being. I suppose what I'm saying is that we have to understand what are the gravest violations against the human beings around the world that are affecting their mental health the most. Abuse, murder, violence, these horrible atrocities, war, genocide, witnessing genocide, all of these things. If we do not act upon these injustices, then we are telling a lot of these victims that what happened to them is not very serious and it's not worthy of a response. And I think that causes some of the worst mental health issues around the world. To feel like you don't matter. The amount of stateless Rohingya women who I've met who faced, horrors, they're still stateless. They still feel like they don't matter, and there's no accountability. So I suppose what I'm saying is, while we need to look at both sides, both the treatment, but also what is this underlying sickness when we tell people they don't matter? What is this underlying abuse when we value this life over this life, this race over this race? What is that doing to our humankind? And when we're selective about who we help and how much we help them. We are telling them that this person, this human, this family is valued more or less than this family. That is mentally damaging. So we have to know what we value. We have to know what we stand for, and we have to not, we have to select who we assist based on their needs and their vulnerabilities, and not be distracted or influenced by business interests or partnerships. We need to get to the center where we are focusing on defending our core human rights and values. And that is where we make decisions from.
Thank you very much. I fully agree what you said. You have so much experience on these matters. If I move to another humanitarian missions that you take for UNHCR and your advocacy on behalf of displaced people have always been quite meaningful for me. As you may know, as a young boy, I was one of the displaced persons during the early 1950s when I was just a young boy during the Korean War. And this experience continues to haunt me to this day. I remember hunger pains in my stomach and the smell of munitions and sounds of conflict, how people were not being taken care of by anybody. There was no government. In fact, they were all busily engaging in fightings. In a recent published piece for the Financial Times, you said that, if I may quote, we should seize this moment to rethink our approach to humanitarian aid and development from the bottom up, placing displaced people at the center of our response and putting more people in the hands of the people most affected. These words particularly resonated with me as a formerly displaced young person. I think they also really convey not only your commitment to improving the lives of refugees and internally displaced people, but also your gift for coupling messages of hope with the specific policy recommendations. Angelina, in this regard, what are some of the specific actions that should be taken for youth and refugees, and important discussions points in the year of 2021 and beyond? Do you have any message you want to send out to the people of the world, particularly the political leaders of the world, who needs more compassion?
Yes. Well, one thing is, I was aware of your situation when you were young. And if I'm right, it was when you came into contact with the UN and the international aid agency, the idea of people from around the world being connected and delivering some support. Is that right?
That's right. I lived on the powdered milk provided by UNICEF and the textbook provided by UNESCO, etc.
And so I think if we can remember the value of what we do when we reach across and we help someone in need, as a people from across the world, as a united international agency, when we are doing our job right and we are coming together to reach the most vulnerable and give assistance in their hour of need, we are not only doing what is the right thing to do, we are also building a future. We are making sure that a little boy like yourself grows to be this extraordinary man that you are and is able to do all the good that you do. We are far too, I would ask that we remember, we spend so much time, you hear people say, we're going to invest in weapons, we're going to invest in we're going to put boots on the ground. We think this is the way to control and manage the world and show power and be selfish and take this for our own, because if we have this, we're stronger. We're going to take care of ourselves. The strength of being so strong in value, in humanity, and helping to reach out and balance and work with the peoples of the world is the strongest way forward. It builds more than anything. There's no better investment, particularly children, particularly women. There's no better investment. So it is yes, it is the humane thing to do. It is also a smart thing to do. And I think, if I may, personally, I have had the privilege of working with UNHCR for 20 years because I was able to meet and spend time with displaced families. And so often we hear a displaced family or a refugee, and it's as if it's this mass of people, each person a survivor, each person has overcome unsurmountable odds even to be alive and be there. From every continent, every country, every race, every religion, people around the world. These people are extraordinary. And we so often treat them as a burden. And we think, oh, how do we get them more food? How do we do this? What do we do? They are the future of their countries. They are so capable. There is nowhere I would rather be than to be sitting with these families because of what I learned from them and because of how unique their sense of the world is and how they learn to survive and what they can teach. So practically, we have to try to prevent more displacement. Practically, we have to address how climate change is displacing people and we have to address it, understand it, and see how we can prevent the displacement, because we cannot stop all of the changes that are coming. We have to value and educate displaced people. We have new technologies and we have new ways to reach them, because they are the future of their countries and they must not lose their education. In fact, the stronger they can be, the stronger the future of their countries will be. We have to invest in people more than weapons. We have to come together and value people. And we also have, I think it is something 68%. I'm not good with always using percentages, but it is something about 68% of people displaced are from 5 countries. And you know very well, having been Secretary General, if we cannot prevent, which is what we want to do, we have to try to find solutions so those from those countries are not displaced indefinitely and for decades. So we need to pressure for diplomatic solutions and ways forward, and we need to find ways to also return people where we can.
Well, you really made a very important point, how to cultivate a potentiality of those refugees and young people. Who knows that among them, if we educate them properly, if we really empower them, one day, who knew that one of the refugees became the Secretary General of the United Nations 60 years later. So it is a matter of how the political leaders pay their priority on making things possible. You have just pointed out very important means. Well, Angelina, thank you. As a follow-up, let's stay on the topic of youth. Again, we are talking about the youth.
Yes.
During my time as a Secretary General, I understood that young people are absolutely essential to solving so many of the world's biggest challenges. And you mentioned education. Education is also very critically important. So I strongly feel that we must do much more to engage and empower the youth as they are enablers to achieve the global goals and forge a brighter world for all. For these reasons, I have been trying to help elevate global citizenship, empower young people in recent years through my work with the Institute of Global Engagement and Empowerment at Yonsei University, as well as two foundations which I have established, Ban Ki-moon Center for Global Citizens located in Vienna, Austria, and Ban Ki-moon Foundation for a Better Future here in Seoul. According to UNICEF, the number of children without access to education, I think there are more than 60 billion people who do not have any access to a primary education at this time. And also health services globally will increase from 46 to 56% in the post-COVID-19 world now. 370 million children may miss school meals, which I used to get during my school days in 1950s. And the digital divide is serious, with at least 31% of school children worldwide not reached by remote learning. Considering such realities, and based on your own humanitarian work, how do you think we can empower the youth to help to meet today's challenges? Specifically, what are the roles? How can we empower these young people and address inequalities caused and worsened by COVID-19 at this time? It involves health, education, housing, and employment, for example. Well, what can we do, and what do we expect from the youth now?
Well, I first of all, you have been really leading and doing so much for the youth, and I think it says a lot that you've done, worked and been Secretary General and seen all you've seen and come to the realization that, of course, this is where you put your efforts and this is what we must all focus on. We have a youth that are more connected. They're connected to each other in new ways. They're connected online, those who have it, but there is more that they are aware of, many of them, and they are wanting answers from all of us. They are wanting to know more of what is really happening. I think one thing I've tried to do is I worked recently with Amnesty International on a book. We made a handbook. It will be out, I think, in maybe end of the year, to help explain to children the rights of a child, and how where these rights, where so many countries came together and said these are basic principles of dignity and rights that should be for all children. How they, of course, how they reach the children or where they are blocked is also something we explain to the children. And we want to help the children know what they have a right to and what they can fight for. So I think educating them to be aware of their own rights is very important. I think we have to acknowledge as adults how many children around the world are still being violated in so many ways, and we need to be stronger in our response against it. So while we focus on education and learn about new technologies and new ways we can use these technologies to reach even refugee camps and maybe put their university of the country they fled online one day, or in their camera, in their phone. How do you test them? How do you get a diploma when you're displaced? How can we better reach everyone, because the tools have changed and potentially there could be ways to use these tools to reach more people. But if we are still having millions of children stateless and not giving them anything that proves they exist, they are vulnerable to trafficking. They cannot sign up for universities or education. So we have to get all the way down to the core of where are children even safe enough. You know, it's like, it's the triage in the refugee camp. You have a flood of children. You have to make sure they are stable, safe, protected, healthy. And then you make sure they get their education. So we have to protect the children. Then we have to make sure they are aware of their rights, and we have to educate the children. But all pieces together.
Well, thank you very much for your unique perspective. Now, Angelina, due to the time constraint, I now ask you just two brief questions, which are rather personal. I am a lifelong diplomat, and the diplomats and humanitarian professionals sometimes talk about burden sharing. You also mentioned just now burden sharing, etc. In numerous interviews, you have emphasized the resilience of refugees and that they should not be seen as a burden. They are not burden, they are asset. They are asset. Could you explain more about with an example, if you have?
Oh, so many. Well, let's remember, a refugee population they are not the people who took up arms and decided to hurt other people in the country, right? They are these other citizens. They are people who risk their lives to go back and help their friends or their family members. They're quite brave. They are mothers and fathers. They are also professionals. Many very skilled, very trained professionals, doctors, lawyers, educators, philosophers, poets. They are everybody. And when you think of them that way, and you think of a camp of 500,000 people, among those people are people who can teach us so much about their country, their culture, but also they are learning. They are engineers. I've been in camps where they couldn't figure out. I was in one camp we were in, it was the Thai border. And they were saying, well, we couldn't use the land because often, you know, you have to be careful with land in a host country because you're going to return it. And so you make it, sometimes you can use it, sometimes you can't. And so they were talking about doing the hanging, and they used the bags and the hanging gardens and the way they hooked up this whole thing. It was one of the refugees who had an engineering degree, and he redid a whole section. I've seen refugees volunteer in the front lines for COVID because they're surgeons and they're nurses and they're doctors. They're volunteering right now in host countries, on border camps. They are, the reality is, I don't think many people watching this could survive what a refugee survives, because it's not just the war. It's the dehumanizing loneliness of a lack of response to your abuses. And it's the sitting in day after day in a situation where you know you're capable, but you are not allowed to help yourself. It's the feeling you've lost your home and your friends and everything you knew, and you have little to offer your children. but you keep going. So yes, I think that if we think of them as a population that is strong and we invest in them, then on return, or wherever they may go, but I know many want to go home, they rebuild. They're the engineers that rebuild. They're the lawyers that work. They're the future presidents and teachers. And the more we leave them broken, what are we returning to that country? They are that country.
Well, thank you very much. As you may know, it is I, during my time as Secretary General, who created an office of Special Envoy on Youth for the first time in the history of the United Nations. I appointed young Jordanian young man, Mohammed Al-Hendawi, who is now working as a Secretary General of a World Scout Federation. And now it is being taken by a Sri Lankan young lady as a special envoy, as you are doing for refugees, but I have created one special envoy for youth.
So
now,
important.
again, to follow up, is it difficult to get these types of key messages through to international stakeholders? And my last question would be, what is the biggest challenge you think in carrying out special envoy job as UNHCR? And what can we do more? What do you expect world's political leaders and business communities do more for your work?
I'm careful to answer this because I do work within the UN and I see the efforts, especially on the ground every day, and a lot of good work and life-saving work. But if I can acknowledge, and you know yourself, the challenges within the United Nations are, there are, it's funny, I'm not sure how to put this carefully. If there are countries that are leading countries that are making decisions that are tied to their business interest, it is not for the greater good. If there are countries who, we talk a lot of these countries being poor countries. We're going to help these poor countries, send aid to these poor countries. But many of these countries are not poor. Many of these countries are rich in resources, but they've been exploited. So if we're not looking at all aspects of why the country and the people are in the state they are in, and also each of the member states asking their part in that, then we're not really focusing as much on wanting to solve it, but we solve certain things and we also continue to benefit in the ways we want to benefit. I know this isn't a popular answer, but I think we have to look at where we can do better. And one of the challenges has been that there are countries, as you know, that if you speak out, we're not politicians in the UN, right? We're neutral. But we see politics affect the field, and we see politics and business interests affect the situation. So our situation, our ability to help is limited because of it. But if we say too much, maybe aid is lessened or someone is compromised in the field. My greatest challenge is having to be careful so the work can continue in the field, but also as a human being, I'm very frustrated when I see that not everything is being addressed, and some things seem at times that we are not truly working, not the UN, but there are other things at play that are beyond the UN that we cannot always say.
spending so much time of your own is based purely on humanity. So you have a right to be strong and vocal for the benefit and for humanity. Now, Angelina, it seems we are now running out of time, unfortunately, so I want to show my deep appreciation to you for joining us for this active and enlightening GEEF 21 special conversation on leaving no one behind in a post-pandemic world. The bottom line is, ladies and gentlemen, that without prioritizing refugees and displaced people during these very difficult challenges, ongoing COVID-19 recoveries, we will not succeed in ensuring that no one is left behind. The challenges before us may be vast, but by elevating political will and working together, we can create the future we want. This is the motto of the United Nations. What kind of a future you want? We have to make sure that we create the future we all want, one driven by inclusion, compassion, empowerment, and sustainability for all people and our planet. My gratitude, deepest gratitude, once again goes to Angelina Jolie for her great humanity and inspiring words. And I thank you all for your attention and participation and active efforts to forge a better world for all as a global citizen. Let us work together to hand over this world to our succeeding generations, a world of peace and prosperity. That is our moral and political responsibility. Thank you again, ladies and gentlemen, and Angelina, for your great efforts, and I wish you all the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and to you and everyone watching.
Thank you very much. I hope to see you again. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.